Hello, I'm Mike Morin, and this is Reset. 40 is the New Happy. It's a podcast series that celebrates people who reinvent themselves in midlife. And today, we're actually going video, and I want to thank Carolyn Choate for letting me take a part of her program while doing the podcast, which is 1 year old. It can be heard on ManchesterInkLink.com, which is a hyper news service for Southern New Hampshire. And it's also up on iTunes, so you can pick up a subscription that way as well. And why not video today? Carolyn Choate is known to many for being a producer, host, and a former owner of WYNC TV 13 in Nashua for almost 23 years. Carolyn is a breast cancer survivor and an activist, and this summer she is planning a most unusual and intriguing trip to raise awareness and money for those who need financial help while fighting this very insidious disease. Before we get to the trip in Denmark, though, tell me about those many years in TV and I think a show that a lot of people remember, 142 Maine.
Oh, that was definitely a large proportion of my life. We're taping here in Nashua today. My heart is still here, and I do still produce TV, and in fact this program is airing in Boston today as part of working for the new owners, OTA. We did go digital 2 years ago, and that sort of pushed us into a much larger market, way beyond our wildest imagination when this truly mom and pop deal started back in 1989. And the whole idea of community-oriented local public affairs programming, even before Nashua had, of course, public access, we were it. And not only were we it, we lived and breathed it. We had a studio in our basement for post-production. We had two babies in between, and between breastfeeding one on this side and editing on this side, etc. It was our life for all those years, and I wouldn't have changed a thing. I love Nashua. We had moved here from Vermont after working in television there for about 3 or 4 years, and that's quite a bit of difference culturally, geographically, philosophically. Burlington, Vermont, Nashua, New Hampshire. I cried the first week, and about 6 months later I looked at Gordon and I said, I love this place. I'll never move back to Vermont.
And that makes so much sense because you've invested so much personally, emotionally. I don't think you got rich doing this, but you certainly have enriched the community by virtue of the variety of programming that you brought. Reinvention takes many forms, as we know, sometimes not good. In 2003, you were diagnosed with breast cancer, and you were given a prognosis that was not especially encouraging, yet 13 years later, you look great.
It's my lucky number.
And you're still raising hell. So how did you get past that? I mean, how do you look past what a doctor tells you? Because we think they know the answers, and they don't always know the answers. So talk about that reinvention.
That was a very important one because I have always said you have to be your own advocate. That's my biggest message. My second biggest message is, many people look to others for hope. Give me a chance, doc. What is my percentage? What is my chance of living? And at that time, my chances were very slim. They said They said at the time in 2003 that I would probably not see my 12-year-old complete middle school, let alone high school.
What a way to put it.
And my 9-year-old. So they said I had a 75% chance of dying within 3 years. So at that point, I realized that the hope had to come from within me. And I did my own research. I found the ways that gave me the uplift. And it was also through my oncologist, Dr. Gautami Rao, right here in Nashua, leading edge, cutting edge oncologist. And her words were, you know what? You got a 25% chance of beating this. Hello? What a difference. You know, the glass suddenly went from half empty to half full.
Sounds like it was more than half empty, the way it was presented.
And always get a second opinion.
Right.
At that second opinion, 6 weeks after that initial very shocking diagnosis, they reclassified the cancer. The only problem was there was a little bit miscommunication, and I didn't know till 6 months later. And I'm in the doctor's office, and I said, Doc, I said, I just got this feeling, I just got this deep intuition that maybe I could beat this aggressive cancer that I have. And I named the type of cancer, and she says, you don't have that. And I went, I don't? She goes, no, they reclassified that at Dana-Farber. Ask a lot of questions all the time.
So at what point do you, after knowing all this, you embrace your life, you embrace your body, because you did have a double mastectomy, so...
I did not have a double.
You did not?
No.
All right, I was misinformed.
In 2003, I had my right breast removed. No one said at the time, you know what? Chances are pretty good it might go to the second breast, so have that one removed too. No mention of that. I should have asked. And so I was, and I'll be frank, I was very large-breasted, and I just had the right breast removed. I said, why bother having reconstruction? I'm not going to make it, Who cares? So I did not have reconstruction, and I got a prosthetic. And you know what? After carrying around that 5-pound prosthetic for 5 years, getting into good health, I realized I am going to make this. I became more active. I got a treadmill. I did, 3 miles a day. I did marathons, triathlons, you name it. I did it. Got a kayak. I had been a couch potato, no longer was, because physical exercise does reduce your chance of recurrence. I went to my doctor and I said, you know what? I'm tired of lugging this third wheel around, and I think I'll get a reduction. And she said, you know what? I think I'll write you a prescription to have it removed. No more testing, no more mammograms, no more, the other test escapes me right now, chemo brain. And I'm like, I really like that idea. Didn't have insurance at the time, had to wait till the station was sold and I became employed elsewhere through the new ownership, and got that second mastectomy in 2012. I say flat as a pancake and loving it.
Let's talk about what you are doing to spread awareness and raise some money in a most unusual way. It caught my attention. You are going to Europe in, July 24th, and you have some props with you today, including a backpack and a book. So tie all the pieces together. What does Beowulf have to do with breast cancer awareness?
Beowulf is a classic. It was the first English written poem ever. Oddly enough, it wasn't about Great Britain. It was about the Swedes and the Danes, but written by monks, anonymous monks in Great Britain, 8th century. But to go back a little bit before that, in 2014, first of all, I have a master's degree in literature and writing. And I've always been I'm not going to say that I'm a very radical feminist, because I'm not. I'm moderately feminist, I'll say. But it bothered me that all the great Western epics were from a male lens. Homer's Odyssey, the Iliad, Dante's Inferno, Milton's great poem, Beowulf is the main character of this, etc. And so I had the opportunity to join my daughter, who was working at the Aspen Institute at the time, my oldest daughter. She had a 6-week stint in Athens at the time, and said, "Hey, Mom, I got 4 days off in the Greek islands afterwards. Join me there. We'll have some R&R." And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to go all the way to Santorini for 4 days. So I said, let me think about it. So I thought, I'll go 10 days before by myself. Greek islands, Homer's Odyssey. Odysseus spent 20 years finding himself. It's time I found myself. It's time I found myself without the prosthetics, found who I was at this time in my life, getting used to the notion of not having any breasts. Was I still who I thought I was? Can I embrace this new me? You know, is a woman defined as a woman by her breasts, or is it her mind? Who was I? And I planned this trip meticulously, and I did it. This was my backpack. Went to Eastern Mountain Sport. This is all it. I went on this trip, and I could not have asked for a more rewarding, realizing trip than that. And, you know, weather, experiences. You know, Mike, I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done that Greek trip with that ease today, knowing the immigrant situation and knowing the port city where I came through, Piraeus, is, you know, pandemonium 2 years later. It breaks my heart to see what's happening in the world. But anyway, 2 years passed. I have the opportunity. My husband and I and our family have had many exchange students with our family. It's a great experience for families to have students of other cultures living in your family and understanding peace, etc. And we had a young woman from Indonesia living with us 5 years ago who's gone on to become a pediatrician. And this is through the Rotary Exchange Program. And we email and Facebook, and she said, "Carolyn, I'm doing my first pediatrician rounds in Copenhagen. Is it possible you could meet me there?" And I thought about it, and I went, bingo, Beowulf. And then I thought, well, how could I make this more about cancer and survivorship, and more about something other than me? And that's when I thought that I would love to do it as a fundraiser for the New Hampshire Breast Cancer Coalition, a wonderful, wonderful
Nancy
group.
Ryan, fantastic.
And, you know, the thought that I know the struggles, I've been there, I know the struggles of women who fall between the cracks and, you know, don't have the means sometimes to get to treatment, or don't have the means to support themselves while in treatment, need money for food, need money for rent, etc. And then finding an organization, a similar organization in Denmark. Denmark has the second highest diagnoses and fatality rate of breast cancer in the world. Who knew? You know, you hear Bernie Sanders talking about how great life is in Scandinavia. The smoking rates in Scandinavia would blow your mind. The cost of food in Scandinavia blows your mind. So that put together, I thought, I'll do a GoFundMe page, and I'll call it She-Wolf. So the whole object of this is that Beowulf was a Swede, and he was a noble warrior who was called upon by the Danes, 8th century, the big mead halls at the time. The king of Denmark was a benevolent king, a good king. His subjects loved him. Nights were spent, drinking mead and hanging out, and they'd pass out with sublimity, and out creeped under from the mead hall would creep Grendel, the monster, and he'd eat a bunch of them, and they'd wake up the next day, blood everywhere, and everyone was in a tizzy. Oh my God, someone's got to kill this monster. Someone's got to kill this monster, Grendel. We've got no one of us can. We've got to go back. Beowulf was known in all the land for being, the Mel Gibson of the region, and he came, and it was a mighty battle, a long, enduring, hard-won battle, but Beowulf finally slayed Grendel.
So you are Beowulf.
I'm She-Wolf.
She-Wolf, excuse me.
And Grendel was breast cancer. And I want to represent, this is a fairy tale. Cancer's not a fairy tale. There are so many heroines in real life who battle this disease every day. Some of them don't make it, and it's for them too. I want to represent them, and in so doing, it will just be, I think, probably the pinnacle of my life to do so. And at the end of the trip, I am just overwhelmed and honored that the U.S. ambassador to Denmark, appointed by President Obama, will be Ambassador Gifford, and many members of his cabinet, the health minister, environmental and science minister. Everyone must be concerned that the cancer rates are what they are. So I'm leaving July 24th. I'll hang out with our exchange student Olivia for a few days, and then I'm hoofing it.
Solo, correct?
Solo.
By yourself. And the length of your hike is how long?
28 miles.
20, so it's a couple days.
And the reason I'm going to the town of Lajra, and the reason I'm going to the town of Lajra is in 1964, archaeologists found absolute proof that the very mead halls mentioned in the epic exist from the 8th century. And there's a museum there today called the Hall of Legends. And I'm going to the very place. It's really incredible to think that those monks knew of it and knew of the kings that ruled in the era, in that epic. And so that's why I'm making that particular journey into Ware.
This would be a really good time to tell folks how they can contribute by way of your GoFundMe page or other ways to get money to you and to your cause. How do we do that?
Right on the screen right now is my GoFundMe page, and if you go to the link, I'd be very appreciative. I'm hoping to raise $10,000, and with that, half will go to the Danish Breast Cancer Organization, to their patient services program, just like here in the United States to the patient services program. Mike, I know that a lot of funds do go to research and still should and continue. We all know that until it's cured, research needs to continue. However, as mentioned before, we need to also remember the patients and their needs.
Before we wrap up, I would love to hear about your daughters, because going back to the original diagnosis, you were told in terms of not living past a certain milestone in one of your daughter's lives, which I just think is a horrible way to express it to somebody who's just getting the news. So that was back in 2003. Where are the girls now, and what have they learned from your reinventions and your illness, do you think?
Well, at the time, my oldest was 12 and youngest was 9. And the 12-year-old, who's very more inward, more, she's not as, how shall I say, the youngest is very outward, and she's an actress, so she's out there. It was very hard for the 12-year-old, and she kept a lot inside. And I think had I the opportunity to do it over, I would have probably gotten more counseling than I did for her. But the good news scientifically was that all the tests that I took genetically, not just the BRCA1/2, but I took the PALB2, which is a very intricate test, I was negative for all of those. So therefore, that's not to say that they are, that's not to say that 100% they will not get breast cancer. It's to say that there's not a genetic link from me. But my oldest has come out of her shell, so to speak. She lives in Saudi Arabia. She is doing really well there. She's the vice president of event management for King Abdullah University. So it's been a very interesting
She came out of her shell.
time for her. And then the youngest just graduated from my alma mater, Washington College, and got her first big job. And we were in a fashion show together at Dartmouth, through Dartmouth Hitchcock's Norris Cotton Cancer Center 3 weeks ago. And she's 23 now. I was really moved when she said, as part of her bio that they read when we modeled together for the Seeds of Hope fashion show, that something to the effect of, my cancer experience not only affected me and our family, but the community, and that my surviving was uplifting for the entire community. And it meant a lot to her that the community supported our whole family through it. And that was something that I didn't know she had picked up on, but in hindsight sees. And I think that it makes her a more empathetic person going forward. So I'm happy for that.
Isn't that one of the great things about being a parent, is hearing these things you didn't realize that they kept or maintained or learned from, and just out of nowhere, there it is, and you say, well, I guess I did okay. It's a wonderful thing. We'll have a wonderful hike. It's a great thing you're doing. I'm glad it's getting some publicity now, which it deserves. And it was a great story. Carolyn Choate, a pleasure to have you on Reset. 40 is the New Happy. Thank you for listening, and thank you for watching this time.